It's pretty wild to think about. We're kind of at this point where we can like rebuild, redesign the machinery of life to make new medicines. It's
Yeah.
pretty crazy. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what we're diving into today, protein engineering and how it's completely changing the game in pharmaceuticals.
Right.
We've got a ton of research here showing how just tweaking these tiny protein molecules is shaking up drug discovery and development.
Yeah, a lot of sources for sure.
So we're going to cut through all the complexity, all the jargon, and try to highlight the most significant ways that protein engineering is, changing how we find and create new therapies.
Absolutely. It's really the foundation of so much of modern drug development.
Yeah.
You can really see that in the different applications we've been looking at.
Okay.
But before we even talk about drugs, I guess we got to start with like, what are we even targeting with these drugs?
Right, right. You got to find the target first. So how does protein engineering help us with that?
Well, it lets us make these super pure versions of the drug targets, like receptors or enzymes.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's super important because when we have these isolated proteins, then we can really study their structure
Okay.
using things like X-ray crystallography.
Yeah.
Basically, you shine a light through a protein crystal and you get to see its 3D shape.
Wow.
We can also do these functional assays,
Okay.
which tells us exactly what these proteins do and how they might be causing a disease.
Okay, so that gives us the blueprint, basically, of what we need to target.
Yeah, exactly. It tells us what we need to design the drug to actually fit to.
Got it. But protein engineering, it does more than just finding targets, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like way more.
Yeah.
So because we have these engineered, purified targets, we can do structure-based drug design,
Uh-huh.
where we're designing molecules that are specifically going to bind to our target.
Uh-huh.
And then we can even engineer proteins themselves,
Really?
like antibodies, to actually act as drug carriers.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So you probably heard of antibody-drug conjugates, or ADCs.
I have, yeah.
That's a prime example.
Okay.
So basically, you've got an antibody that we've engineered to recognize a cancer cell,
Okay.
and it delivers a super potent drug directly to the tumor.
So it's like a guided missile.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's super targeted.
Yeah.
So it minimizes damage to the healthy tissue.
Wow.
And that's a huge advantage over traditional chemotherapy,
Right.
which could be pretty brutal.
So looking at the research here, it looks like we can also change how long a drug lasts in the body.
Yeah, that's another thing. Protein engineering lets us, like, optimize a drug's stability
Uh-huh.
and its half-life,
Okay.
which is basically how long it stays active in the body.
Right.
We can do things like attaching this polymer called polyethylene glycol.
Oh, pegylation.
Yeah, pegylation.
I've heard of that.
Or even just modifying the sugar attachments.
Uh-huh.
That's called glycosylation.
Okay.
And then we can even engineer enzymes that'll activate a drug only when it's at the disease site.
Wow. So it's like super targeted.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, a lot of this research is focusing on antibodies.
Right.
So we've heard about these humanized antibodies.
Yeah, humanized antibodies. Why are they so important?
Well, a lot of those early therapeutic antibodies, they were developed in animals,
Oh, okay.
but we don't want the human body to reject them, right?
Right.
So scientists developed all these techniques to basically humanize them,
Uh-huh.
make them more similar to human antibodies.
I see.
So it reduces the risk of the body having an immune response against the drug itself.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then how do we, like, make these antibodies even more effective, even better?
There's a process called affinity maturation,
Okay.
and it uses directed evolution. So we can make this huge library of different antibody variants,
Okay.
and then we just select the ones that bind the tightest, that have the strongest grip to their target.
Wow.
And we're also seeing these smaller antibody fragments being developed,
Oh, really?
like nanobodies.
Nanobodies. Okay.
And these can actually be better at reaching certain tissues. So they're like tiny little antibodies.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Now, we've also got some research on these bispecific antibodies.
Yeah. Bispecific antibodies.
They sound pretty cool.
Yeah, they're pretty interesting. So those are engineered antibodies that can bind two different targets at the same time.
At the same time. That's crazy.
So, for example, one arm of the antibody might bind to a tumor cell,
Okay.
and then the other arm binds to an immune cell,
Oh, wow.
and it brings them together to fight the cancer.
It's like matchmaking, but for cells.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, we already talked about it, but engineered antibodies are a huge part of those ADCs, too.
Right, right. So it's not just antibodies. Protein engineering is used to develop other protein-based therapies as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. So we're seeing engineered enzymes,
Okay.
hormones, growth factors, and even cytokines being developed as new therapies.
Wow, that's amazing.
And a good example of this is enzyme replacement therapy.
Okay.
It's used for genetic diseases like Gaucher disease,
Okay.
where patients lack a certain enzyme.
Uh-huh.
And so in these cases, engineered enzymes can really make a difference.
Wow. Seems like protein engineering is also speeding up drug discovery too.
Oh yeah, it gives us all the tools we need to make things go faster,
Yeah.
like in high-throughput screening.
Oh, HTS.
Right, HPS.
That
Scientists are testing tons of potential drug candidates,
right.
and protein engineering provides the tools they need,
Uh-huh.
like purified target proteins and engineered cell lines that can help find promising new drugs super fast.
Wow.
And it's even used in disease diagnoses.
Really? Diagnostics too.
Yeah.
Oh.
So those engineered antibodies we talked about, the ones with really high specificity,
Yeah.
those are essential for a lot of diagnostic tests,
Okay.
like rapid antigen tests.
Right, right. Makes sense.
We can also use engineered pathogen proteins to detect antibodies in a patient's samples.
Okay.
And that tells us if they've been infected in the past.
So protein engineering is really changing the game.
Yeah, for sure.
It's involved in everything from finding the targets to actually delivering the drug.
Exactly. It's all about precision.
We've seen so many real-world examples, like modified insulins, humanized antibodies like Herceptin and Avastin, enzyme replacements, and ADCs.
Yeah, and it makes you think, what's next?
Yeah.
We're getting so good at manipulating these building blocks of life.
Right.
What other incredible treatments for diseases that we thought were incurable might be possible with protein engineering in the future?
It's pretty mind-blowing to think about.
Yeah,
Well, on that note, that's our deep dive for today.
it was a good one.
Until next time, keep exploring.
As